Today, I'm going to tell you a story so haunting it lingers long after the silence returns, set deep in the unforgiving American West. A land of burning sun, endless stone, and choices that can cost a life in a single heartbeat. It's a place where fate doesn't knock. It collides. And it all began with one small moment, a young woman taking a road she believed would save her, not knowing that single decision would pull her straight into the arms of the desert, and into a destiny she never saw coming. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. If that feeling stirs something inside your chest, then close your eyes for a moment and follow me. Leave behind the noise of the modern world. Let me take you back to the year 1885. To the Arizona Territory. The Sonoran Desert was unlike any place a woman from the East had ever known. It was a land of brutal contrasts, harsh, empty, and breathtaking all at once. Here, the sun did not simply shine. It struck the ground like iron. The wind did not merely pass through. It scraped and stripped everything it touched. The horizon stretched endlessly, deceiving in its beauty, hiding both danger and salvation within the shadows of crimson stone. And it was there, on a trail no wider than a wound cut through the dust, that Mara Ellison was running. Not on foot, not yet. She sat rigid on the wooden bench of a buckboard wagon, leather reins slick with sweat inside her gloved hands. The wheels groaned and rattled across broken rock, their constant clatter becoming the only rhythm she had known for days. Mara was 23 years old. Though youth still lingered in her face, her eyes carried a fatigue far older than her years. She was not a woman born of the frontier. You could see it in the faded blue of her dress, still fine Boston cotton beneath the dust. You could see it in the way she kept checking her pocket watch, as if time out here might still obey rail schedules and city rules. But more than anything, you could see it in the fear she worked so hard to conceal behind a firm jaw and steady posture. She was not fleeing an angry father, nor the law. She was running from a ghost back east. The Civil War had ended nearly 20 years earlier on paper, but for Mara, it had never truly finished. It lived in the empty chair at Sunday supper. It echoed through the silent rooms of her family home. And it lived in the memory of a man named Jonah Reed, a young man who had marched away with dreams of a spring wedding, and returned only as a letter sealed in black. She had tried to live the life expected of her. She became the dutiful daughter, the polite neighbor, the schoolteacher who smiled when spoken to and nodded when spoken over. But the city had begun to suffocate her. Gray streets, gray skies, gray days folding endlessly into one another. She needed distance. She needed air. She needed a silence that was real, not empty rooms pretending to be peace. So she accepted a teaching post at a remote schoolhouse on the edge of the territory, a place barely marked on maps. That afternoon, the heat pressed down on her shoulders like a physical weight, dry, relentless. The air smelled of sagebrush and sun-baked stone, sharp, wild, untamed. Mara wiped sweat from her brow with the back of her hand. The rented bay gelding plodded forward, as worn from the journey as she was herself. "Just a few more miles," she murmured softly, though she was truly speaking to her own resolve. Ahead, the trail dipped sharply into a wide, sandy wash, a dry riverbed carved long ago by waters that no longer asked permission. The canyon walls rose on both sides, steep and jagged, casting long purple shadows across the sand. It felt cooler there, wrapped briefly in the earth's shade. But Mara did not yet know the desert's first rule. The danger you see is rarely the one that kills you. Above her, The sky remained a brilliant, cloudless blue. But far beyond the horizon, high in distant mountains, a storm had broken, violent and unseen. A monsoon ghost had emptied itself upon stone, and now that water was racing home. It began as a sound. At first, Mara mistook it for wind, a distant hum threading through the canyon. Then it deepened. The vibration traveled through the wooden seat and straight into her bones. The horse sensed it first. Its ears flattened, its body tensed. "Easy now," Mara said, tightening the reins as the animal danced nervously across the rocks. But the sound grew. The hum became a roar, a thunderous locomotive howl that ricocheted between canyon walls. Mara looked up just as the wash curved ahead, and her breath caught in her throat. A wall of water surged toward her. Not blue, not clear. It was thick brown mud, churning with uprooted brush and boulders the size of anvils, moving with terrifying speed, alive with force. There was no time to turn the wagon, no time to think. The horse screamed and reared, snapping the wagon tongue like brittle wood. "Run!" Mara cried. She threw herself from the bench, striking the sand hard as she rolled toward the canyon wall, clawing desperately for higher ground. But the desert was faster. The flood slammed into the wagon with the sound of cannon fire. Wood splintered. Metal shrieked. Then the water took her. Cold. Heavy. Merciless. It swept her legs from beneath her, flipping the world upside down. There was no sky. No ground. Only darkness and crushing mud filling her ears, her nose, her mouth. She was tossed like a broken doll, slammed against stone, dragged across raw sand. She fought blindly, clawing upward, kicking against the pull. Her clothes became anchors. "This is it," a voice whispered inside her mind. "This is how the silence takes you." She broke the surface once, just long enough to glimpse blue sky, gasping a breath that was half water, before the current swallowed her again. Before her head could strike something solid, a submerged log perhaps, or the canyon wall itself, everything vanished. When Mara Ellison opened her eyes again, the roar was gone. The silence that replaced it was far worse. It pressed in from every direction, absolute and unnerving. She lay on her side, half buried in cooling mud. Her body felt shattered, a collection of deep, throbbing aches and sharp, burning stabs of pain. Her mouth tasted of copper and grit. Slowly, painfully, she forced herself upright. Her blue dress was torn beyond recognition, soaked dark with mud. Her boots were gone. When she looked around, she understood. The flood had passed as suddenly as it had arrived, leaving behind only glistening muck and broken debris torn from the mountainside. The wagon was gone. The horse was gone. She was alone. The sun was sinking low, bruising the sky with shades of violet and blood orange. The heat was draining away, replaced by a creeping chill that seeped into her soaked clothing. "Hello?" she croaked. Her voice sounded foreign, thin, broken, swallowed instantly by the vast canyon. No answer came. Only the wind whispered through the juniper branches, sounding like the murmur of an old spirit. Mara tried to stand. A flash of white-hot agony tore up her leg. She cried out and collapsed back into the mud, her ankle already swelling, angry, useless, betraying her. She stared up at the canyon walls towering above her now, no longer majestic, only indifferent. Closing in. She was miles from the trail, miles from the outpost, miles from the life she had known. Hot tears stung her eyes, but she clenched her jaw until she tasted blood. She remembered the grief she had fled, the quiet rooms, the city that had hollowed her out. I didn't come here to die, she thought fiercely, a spark igniting in her chest. I came here to live. But as night crept in, carrying the distant cries of coyotes and stretching shadows across the red stone, Mara understood a terrifying truth. The world of teacups and schedules was gone. She was at the mercy of the wild now. And in the desert, mercy was rare. Yet she was not as alone as she believed. High above, on the canyon ridge, a shadow moved. Not a ghost, not an animal. A man. He stood perfectly still, blending so completely with the rock that he looked carved from it. He had watched the flood seize her. He had seen her claw her way to the bank. And now he watched her try and fail to stand. He was the desert's eyes, and he had found her. High in the cliffs where the air thinned and eagles nested lived a man named Zayirk. Zayirk was not a man who sought company. He was a former scout, one who had walked away from war, from army forts filled with broken promises and rigid commands, and from reservations bound by fences. He had chosen the solitude of the Superstition Mountains instead. He was 30 years old, but his eyes carried the ancient weariness of canyon stone. That morning, Zayirk had not been searching for people. He had been hunting a killer. A mountain lion, a massive male with a notched ear, had been stalking the lower washes. Zayirk moved through the brush with a silence that made the wind seem clumsy. Dust clung to his boots. Sage scented his hair. His movements were fluid, deliberate. He followed the cat's tracks through soft sand until the story beneath his feet changed. Zayirk stopped. He crouched, one hand hovering above the earth. The lion's prints had vanished. In their place ran a desperate drag mark, chaotic, uneven, carved through red dirt. A handprint followed beside it. Too small, too delicate. The desert did not make mistakes. People did. He followed the trail nearly a quarter-mile into the belly of the wash, where floodwaters had receded. There, beneath twisted mesquite branches, he found what looked like a ghost. A woman, or what remained of one. She lay curled on her side, half swallowed by drying mud. Her once blue dress clung to her like torn skin. Her hair was matted with silt, fanned around her head like a dark halo. Against the red earth, she looked like shattered porcelain. Zayirk studied her for a long moment. He felt no pity. Pity got men killed in the desert. Instead, he assessed her coldly. Sun-poisoned, cracked lips bleached white, one leg bent at a wrong angle. By all rights, the desert should have claimed her already. Coyotes should have found her. The sun should have stopped her heart. But then her chest rose, shallow, ragged. She was fighting. Even unconscious, she was fighting. Zayirk exhaled slowly, the sound like dry leaves shifting. The town lay a full day's walk away. She would never survive the journey in this heat. And he had no horse. He hunted on foot. He had a choice. Leave her to the fate she had wandered into, or bring a stranger, a white woman, a possible enemy, into his sanctuary. He knelt. His hands, scarred and calloused from a lifetime of survival, moved with unexpected care. He checked her pulse, fast and fragile, like a trapped bird. Her forehead burned beneath his palm. Foolish, he murmured in his own tongue. Sliding his arms beneath her, he lifted her. She moaned softly but did not wake. She was dangerously light. To Zayirk, she was a burden of a different kind. He was carrying the very world he had tried to leave behind. He did not take her toward the road. He carried her upward. Along hidden switchbacks carved into the cliff face, over stone where lesser men would stumble, he climbed until the land itself vanished from maps. There, concealed behind hanging ivy and rock, waited a cave, high enough to see the world, deep enough to hide from it. Inside, the air was cool, scented with wood smoke and dried herbs. He laid her gently upon his bedroll, a nest of furs and woven blankets. For the next hours, the warrior became a healer. He cut away the ruined boots, examined the ankle, swollen, purple, furious. He did not flinch. He crushed sage and chaparral into a pungent green poultice, bound her leg with clean cloth, and fed her water drop by careful drop until her throat obeyed. He did not sleep. He sat near the cave mouth, fire crackling softly, skinning a rabbit caught earlier, his knife flashing in the glow. And he waited. It was the smell that brought her back. The scent of roasted meat drifted through darkness, warm, familiar, safe. It pulled her upward. When Mara opened her eyes, the world swam in heat and pain. She tried to move, and her legs screamed in protest, locking her in place. She gasped, the sound echoing off stone. "Quiet," a voice said. It wasn't a command, just fact. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Her vision cleared. She was not in a house, not in a hospital. She was in a cave, low ceiling blackened with soot. And across the fire sat a man with eyes reflecting flame. A nightmare, at least according to everything Boston had taught her. He was bare-chested, skin burnished copper in firelight. Long black hair fell loose around his shoulders. A jagged scar traced his arm. A history of violence etched into flesh. Every penny dreadful tale, every whispered warning from her aunt about the wild men of the West flooded her mind. Savage, raider, killer. She scrambled backward, pressing herself against cold stone, breath tearing from her lungs. She searched for a weapon, a rock, a stick, anything. There was nothing, only blankets. And the man who sat perfectly still, a knife resting in his hand. Zayirk watched her panic without surprise. He had seen that look all his life. He did not speak. He did not soothe her with gentle lies. Instead, he moved slowly, deliberately. He slid the knife back into its sheath. The soft click echoed loudly in the cave. He lifted a gourd of water and a tin plate of meat, and stood. Mara flinched, throwing her hands up. And that is where the moment held. She threw her hands up to shield her face. "No!" she cried, her voice breaking. "Please!" Zayirk stopped instantly. He did not advance. He remained where he stood, giving her space. Slowly, he crouched and set the tin plate of meat and the gourd of water onto the dirt floor between them. Then he backed away to his place beside the fire. He lifted one hand and made a simple gesture. "Eat." Mara Ellison stared at him, then at the food, then down at herself. A sudden realization jolted through her. Her ankle was wrapped tightly in clean cloth. The pain had dulled, replaced by a steady cooling throb deep in the bone. She touched the bandage. It was neat, careful, almost practiced. Her lips were wet. He had given her water. He had treated her wounds. She looked up again. He was not watching her with cruelty, not with hunger, not with the leering interest she had seen in men at frontier saloons during her journey west. He looked exhausted, bone-tired, soul-worn. Zayirk reached for a stick and nudged the fire. Sparks leapt upward, briefly lighting the cave walls. The ordinary nature of the act, tending the hearth, preparing food, clashed violently with the terror still gripping her chest. Mara swallowed. Her throat felt raw as sandpaper. She needed to know. The silence pressed heavier than the stone above them. She drew her knees toward her chest, trying to make herself smaller. "Are you—" she began, then coughed sharply. She tried again, her voice trembling but steady enough to be heard. "Are you going to kill me?" The question hung in the air. It sounded foolish the moment it left her lips, surrounded by warmth, blankets, and the smell of roasted rabbit. Yet the fear behind it was real. Zayirk stopped stirring the fire. Slowly, he turned his head and looked at her fully for the first time. Their eyes met. Hers were wide, blue, filled with the lessons her world had taught her to believe. His were dark and unreadable, shaped by truths far harsher than hers. He studied her for a long moment. He did not smile. He did not mock her. "If I wanted you dead," he said at last, his voice low and steady like distant thunder, "I would have left you for the sun." He turned back to the fire. "Eat," he said simply. "The desert takes the weak first." Mara stared at his broad back. Her heart still raced, but the sharp edge of panic began to soften, replaced by confusion she could not name. With shaking fingers, she reached for the gourd. She drank. Cool water flooded her body, spreading life through limbs she had thought already lost. And in that moment, she understood two things with absolute clarity. First, she was alive. Second, the man sitting across the fire was the only reason why. Time in the desert did not move by clocks. It moved by shadows sliding across canyon walls, by the slow arc of the sun, by the steady rhythm of breath and heartbeat. For Mara Ellison and Zayirk, the world shrank to the size of that stone shelter. Her ankle was badly sprained, swollen grotesquely, bruised deep violet. Walking was impossible. And so the woman from the city and the warrior of the mountains were bound together by necessity. For 3 days, they lived in the intimacy of survival. At first, Mara watched him like a frightened animal. She sat stiffly atop the firs, clutching her water-stained journal as if it were armor. But fear is exhausting, especially when the one you fear is the reason you are warm, fed, and breathing. Slowly, the fear eroded. Curiosity took its place. She watched him when he believed her asleep. Watched the way he moved, never rushed, never wasted motion. He did not merely survive the land, he belonged to it. Before dawn each morning he stood at the cliff's edge as the first light spilled across the horizon. He raised his palms eastward and whispered words she could not understand. Perhaps a prayer, perhaps a greeting to the sun. The reverence of it tightened her chest. She realized then that the savage her world had warned her about was a lie. The man before her carried discipline and quiet grace no Boston parlor gentleman could comprehend. One afternoon, Mara opened her journal. The pages were warped from the flood, old botanical sketches smeared into ghosts. She turned to a clean sheet and picked up a charcoal stick from the fire pit. For the first time in years, she did not draw a plant. She drew him. The sharp line of his jaw, the slope of his shoulders, the way his hair fell like black silk across his face. It was the only way she knew how to understand him, mapping him line by line. But drawing him from afar was one thing. Feeling his touch was another. On the second evening, the cave grew unnaturally still. The wind outside died, magnifying every sound, the crackle of fire, the rustle of cloth, the quiet intake of breath. Zayirk knelt in front of her. "Leg," he said softly. Mara hesitated, then extended her injured foot. He took it gently in his hands. His palms were rough, hardened by rains, rifles, and stone, the hands of a man who had fought every day of his life. Yet his touch was careful beyond expectation. He unwound the old bindings slowly. His fingers brushed the sensitive arch of her foot and her calf. A jolt passed through her, not pain, something warmer, something sudden. She watched his head bent low, his concentration absolute. The contrast was dizzying, her skin pale and untouched by sun, his dark and scarred, softness and stone. She held her breath, terrified he might stop, and terrified he might not. He looked up. Their eyes locked. In the firelight, the distance between them vanished. There was no schoolteacher, no scout, only a man and a woman suspended in shadow. "It's healing," he said quietly. "Because of you," she whispered. He held her gaze a moment too long. The air vibrated with words neither dared speak. Then he looked away and finished binding her ankle with swift, practiced motions, retreating back towards the fire. But something had changed. The wall between them had cracked. Morning brought revelation. As Zayirk prepared to check his snares, he pulled his tunic over his head. The fabric shifted, and Mara saw it, a wound on his left shoulder, jagged, red, swollen, not fresh, but not healed, infected. He had ignored it while caring for her. "Stop," she said sharply. Zayirk froze. He turned, brow furrowing. "Your shoulder," she said, pointing. "It's infected." He shrugged with a faint wince. "It is nothing." "It is not nothing," she replied, her voice taking on the firm authority of the classroom. "It will poison your blood. Sit down." No one ordered him. No one commanded him. And certainly no white woman had ever told him what to do in his own cave. But she was not looking at him with fear now. She was looking at him with resolve. Slowly, rarely, he sat on a flat rock near her. Mara pulled her satchel close. Her medical kit was gone with the flood, but she still had the desert, and she had knowledge. "I need water," she said. "And the sage you gathered." She worked with focused intensity, cleaning the wound with steady hands. When he flinched, his muscles tightening like iron beneath her touch, she murmured softly, "I know. I'm sorry. Breathe." She crushed sage and chaparral into paste, just as she had read, just as he had done for her ankle, and pressed it into the wound. She bound it with a strip torn from her own petticoat. When she finished, her hand lingered on his uninjured shoulder. Zayirk stared at the white bandage on his skin, then at her face. "Why?" he asked quietly. "You are the guest," she said gently. "You were the patient. Now I am the healer." In that moment, the roles dissolved. He was no longer only her rescuer. He was a man who could bleed, who could hurt. And he had allowed her, a stranger, to witness that weakness. It was an intimacy deeper than touch. It was trust. That night, the silence broke completely. The fire burned low into embers, painting the cave walls red. Outside, coyotes lifted their voices to the moon, and the desert listened. The moon hung high above the canyon, pale and watchful, while outside a lonely chorus of coyotes rose and fell in thin, aching notes. Mara Ellison sat wrapped in a blanket, watching smoke curl toward the dark ceiling of the cave. "You speak English well," she said quietly. "Better than the men in town." Across from her, Zayirk sat whittling a strip of ironwood with his knife. "I learned it in the army," he replied. "Scouts had to understand orders." "You were a scout?" His knife stopped. He did not look up. "For 5 years," he said. "I wore the blue coat, rode their horses, tracked my own people for them." The bitterness in his voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "Why?" Mara asked. "Because they promised," Zayirk said, staring at the blade in his hand. "They said if we helped bring the bands in peacefully, there would be land. There would be peace. They said we would be brothers." He let out a short, humorless laugh. "But promises are only words, and words blow away like wind in this country. They took the land, put my people behind fences, and when they were finished with me, they took back the coat and told me to leave." He finally looked at her. His eyes were dark, bottomless with grief. "To the army, I am an Indian," he said. "To my people, I am the one who wore blue. I belong nowhere." He exhaled slowly. "I walk between worlds, and neither one wants me." Mara felt something crack open in her chest. She recognized that emptiness. "I know," she whispered. Zayirk tilted his head slightly. "How could you? You're from stone houses and clean streets." "I am," she said. "But my house was empty." She drew her knees up and rested her chin against them. "I was supposed to be married, before the war. His name was Jonah Reed. He was kind, gentle. He loved poetry." She stared into the embers. "He died at Antietam. They never sent his body home, only a letter." Her voice wavered. "After that, everyone looked at me with pity. 'Poor Mara,' they said, 'the widow who never was.'" She lifted her eyes to Zayirk. "I felt like I died with him. I walked through my father's house like a shadow, hollowed out." She swallowed. "I came west thinking that if I went far enough, I could outrun the silence." Her lips trembled. "But I carried it with me." Zayirk listened. He did not offer comfort he didn't believe in. He did not promise healing or time or mercy. He simply listened, taking her grief into himself. "We are the same," he said quietly. "Two ghosts," she replied. "Yes," he said. "Two ghosts." Mara reached across the space between them. She did not touch him. She placed her hand flat on the dirt, open, unguarded. Zayirk studied it for a long moment. Then he extended his own hand and set it beside hers. Not touching, but close enough to feel warmth. There, miles from civilization, something rare took shape. Not romance, not desire, but understanding. A bond born from knowing what it meant to be broken, and realizing they did not have to remain broken alone. They sat like that as the fire burned low, the silence around them no longer empty, but full of fragile hope. But the desert gives with one hand and takes with the other. Just as their walls crumbled, the world beyond the cliffs prepared to return. Ghosts can hide for a long time, but the sun always rises to find them. Peace in the desert is a fragile thing, like water on hot stone, perfect and gone in a heartbeat. For 3 days, Mara and Zayirk lived in a world of their own making, ruled only by sunrise and flame. But the outside world does not like to be forgotten. It demands to be remembered. And it often arrives with thunder. It was mid-morning when the illusion shattered. Zayirk stood at the mouth of the cave, scanning the horizon as he always did. Then his body went rigid. The easy calm of the past days vanished, replaced by the tension of a drawn bowstring. "Mara," he said. The weight in his voice turned her blood cold. She limped to his side, favoring her healing ankle. Across the shimmering valley floor, a plume of dust rose against the blue sky, twisting like a serpent, moving steadily toward the cliffs. To an untrained eye, it might have been wind. To Zayirk, it was a message. "Riders," he said. 6, maybe 7. "A rescue party?" Mara asked, hope rising despite herself. He looked at her. The softness of the night before was gone. "They are not looking for you," he said. "They are hunting." He pointed to the lead rider, a black speck cutting through red earth. "That is Marshal Thorne Kell." The name meant nothing to Mara, but the way Zayirk spoke, it made her shiver. Marshal Thorne Kell was a man who wore his badge not as protection, but as a weapon. A man who believed the territory belonged only to those who seized it. He had a long, bloody history with Apache scouts who dared walk away from the army's leash. He does not care about a lost schoolteacher, Zayirk said flatly. He cares that an Indian is unaccounted for. If he finds you with me, he will not see a rescue. He will see a captive. And he will see an excuse to put a rope around my neck. The truth struck Mara like a blow. The world she thought she wanted back was coming for her. And it carried death for the man who saved her. Zayirk turned quickly, gathering what little they had, the gourd, her satchel, the torn remains of her shawl. "We must move," he said. "I'll take you down the back trail, leave you near the road. When they find you alone, they'll take you to town." "And you?" she asked. "I will disappear into the rocks," he said. "It's what I do." He tried to hand her the satchel. She didn't take it. She stood still, fists clenched at her sides. The fear that had ruled her life, the war, her father's grief, the empty house, was gone. In its place stood cold, brilliant clarity. "No," she said. Zayirk froze. "Mara, there is no time," he said urgently. "Kell is a hard man. If he finds us together—" "If he finds you alone," she interrupted, her voice rising, "he will hunt you anyway. He'll say you abandoned me. He'll say whatever he needs to justify his hatred." She stepped closer, ignoring the pain in her ankle. She took the satchel from his hands, then dropped it to the ground. "You told me you were a ghost," she said fiercely, "that you belonged nowhere. But you belong here. You saved me." "I'm trying to save you," Zayirk snapped, desperation breaking through his control. "Go back to your world. Go back to teacups and classrooms. You do not belong in this fight." And for the first time, Mara Ellison did not step away. "My world." Mara laughed, a short, bitter sound that held no humor at all. "My world let me drown." She lifted her chin and met his gaze without flinching. "You pulled me out," she said firmly. Her blue eyes burned with a fire that mirrored his own. "I wasn't lost, Zayirk. I was found. And I will not be used as a pawn to murder the man who found me." For the first time since meeting her, Zayirk had no words. He had expected tears. He had expected gratitude. He had not expected a lioness. But the dust cloud was closing fast now. The faint echo of hooves carried through the canyon, a steady, relentless drumming against stone. Zayirk growled under his breath. There was admiration in his eyes, fierce and unwilling, but there was no time. "Come." They left the cave. The desert, once their ally, turned against them. Marshal Thorne Kell was a cruel man, but he was a skilled tracker. He had not followed the wash blindly. He had split his men. As Zayirk and Mara moved down the narrow switchbacks, trying to slip unseen through shadow and stone, a shout cracked the air from the ridge above. By the split rock, their luck shattered. Zayirk cursed in his own tongue and seized Mara's arm. "Run!" They scrambled downward, boots sliding, stones raining loose beneath their feet. Mara clenched her teeth against the screaming pain in her ankle, forcing her legs to obey. They reached the canyon floor, a narrow corridor of red walls and darkness. Too late. From the mouth of the canyon, 3 riders burst into view, horses charging hard, sand spraying beneath pounding hooves. From the ridge behind them, 2 more men appeared. Rifles rose. They were boxed in, trapped. The lead rider slowed his horse to a measured trot. It was Marshal Thorne Kell. He was thick-set, broad through the shoulders, with skin weathered like cured leather. His eyes were empty, flat and joyless. A dusty black coat hung from his frame, and a silver star glinted coldly against his chest. He didn't look at Mara. Not once. His gaze locked onto Zayirk, and he smiled. It was the smile of a hunter who had finally cornered the wolf. "Well now," Kell called out, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. "Look what the flood decided to deliver. The army said you'd gone to ground, he continued. Said you were a ghost. He slid his rifle from its scabbard. The leather creaked loudly in the silence. I always told them ghosts bleed same as anyone else. Zayirk moved instantly, stepping in front of Mara. He placed his body between her and the rifles. His bow was slung uselessly across his back. He held no weapon in his hands. She is unharmed, Zayirk said. His voice was calm, controlled. It betrayed none of the fear raging beneath it. I found her in the wash. I was taking her to the road. Laughter rippled through the riders, low and ugly. Is that right? Kell sneered. Taking her to the road, or dragging her back to your hole in the rocks? He cocked the rifle. The click snapped through the canyon like thunder. Step away from the lady, boy, Kell said softly. Unless you want her catching the bullet meant for you. Zayirk went rigid. 5 men, 5 rifles. He had a knife, a bow. At best, he might take 1, maybe 2. But Mara would be caught in the crossfire. He looked at Kell, saw the finger tightening on the trigger. Then he glanced back at Mara. Just once. A silent apology. Zayirk, no, she whispered, clutching the back of his shirt. He gently broke her grip. Slowly, deliberately. Zayirk raised his hands. He stepped forward into the open sunlight, leaving her behind him. A single dark figure against red sand. I am unarmed, he said evenly. Let her go. Kell didn't lower the rifle. He kept the barrel fixed on Zayirk's chest. Oh, the Marshal murmured. She's free to leave. He smiled wider. After she watches justice get done. He wasn't going to arrest him. He wasn't going to take him back for trial. The rope had already been chosen. This was not an arrest. This was an execution, carried out in the hush of the canyon, where only stone and shadow would bear witness. Marshal Thorne Kell squinted down the rifle barrel. For the good of the territory, he muttered. Zayirk stood straight. He did not flinch. He did not plead. He met the muzzle with calm eyes, accepting the end with the dignity of a warrior who knows his final battle has already been fought. The silence tightened, like a wire stretched to breaking. But they had forgotten one thing. They had forgotten the woman. They saw a victim, a torn blue dress, a limping step, a fragile figure meant to be rescued or discarded. They did not see the fire that had been lit inside the cave. As Kell's finger began to curl around the trigger, a voice cut through the canyon, clear, sharp, unmistakably commanding. Marshal. For the first time that day, the rifle did not fire. Not because mercy found him, not because the weapon failed. It didn't fire because something impossible happened. Mara Ellison moved. She did not scream. She did not shrink. Ignoring the screaming protest of her injured ankle, she surged forward. 2 strides. That was all it took. She crossed the space between rock and gunman, not fleeing danger, but stepping straight into it. She planted herself directly in front of Zayirk. Her small frame, wrapped in a mud-stained, shredded blue dress, became a living shield. She stood chest to chest with him, staring straight down the black mouth of the Winchester. The canyon fell deathly silent. Even the horses seemed to hold their breath. Move, girl, Kell growled, though his finger wavered. You're in the line of fire. I am exactly where I intend to be, Mara said. Her voice was no longer that of a frightened traveler. Not the voice of grief. It was the voice of Boston society, cold, precise, unyielding as cut glass. The voice of authority. She lifted her chin, her blue eyes drilling into the Marshal's sun-leathered face. You have made a grave error, Marshal. He sneered. You believe this man is your captor. She let the silence stretch. "He is my savior. He's an Apache scout gone rogue," Kell spat. "He's wanted." "He is my guide," Mara said calmly. The lie slid from her lips, wrapped in confidence. "Hired by my family to ensure my safe passage through flood country." Zayirk stiffened behind her. "And if you pull that trigger," she continued, "you won't just be killing a man. You'll be killing the person responsible for keeping the niece of Governor Alden Crowell alive." It was a bluff. A desperate one. A brilliant one. She had no uncle in the governor's mansion. But out here, truth was whatever fear made men believe. Kell blinked. The rifle lowered an inch. "The governor," he muttered. "My uncle," Mara pressed gently, sensing the fracture. "And I assure you, Marshal, if I reach town and report that you executed my rescuer in cold blood—" Her voice never rose. "You will not be wearing that star much longer. You'll be hunting scorpions for wages before the week is done." She did not shout. She didn't need to. Her words carried the weight of civilization, of law, reputation, consequence, things Kell had long believed did not apply to him. He studied her. She was filthy, bruised, half-broken. Yet she stood with the posture of a woman accustomed to being obeyed. Then he glanced at Zayirk. The scout stood frozen behind her, dark eyes wide, stunned. He had been ready to die for her. He had not been prepared for her to stand and live for him. Kell looked back at the Kell Ridge men. The riders shifted uneasily in their saddles. One by one, their rifles dipped. They were rough men, paid hands, but they knew the smell of danger. Killing an Apache was one thing. Killing a governor's kin was another. And the canyon held its breath, waiting to see which lie would decide the fate of them all. Shooting through a white woman who claimed ties to political power, that was a hanging offense. "Marshal," one of the men muttered. "Let's go. We ain't paid enough for politics." Marshal Thorne Kell's face darkened to a violent shade of red. His grip tightened on the rifle until his knuckles bleached white. He glared at Zayirk with raw, unfiltered hatred. Then his eyes flicked to Mara Ellison. He saw it, the certainty in her stare. A wall he could not climb. Kell spat into the dirt. A thick wad of tobacco struck the red dust near Zayirk's boot. "This ain't over, boy," he hissed. "The desert's a big place. You gotta come out sometime." "And when he does," Mara said evenly, "he'll do so as a free man." Kell sneered. He tipped his hat in a mockery of courtesy, then yanked hard on his reins. "Mount up," he barked. The Kell Ridge men turned as one. Dust exploded beneath their hooves as they rode back toward the canyon mouth. The thunder of their horses faded, softer and softer, until only the wind remained. The silence of the red rock returned. Mara stood frozen until the final echo disappeared. Then the strength left her body. Her knees buckled. She would have fallen. But strong arms caught her. Zayirk held her upright, gripping her shoulders, not with a healer's gentleness this time, but with the fierce relief of a man who had just watched death turn away. They stood there in the wash, breathing hard, the sun beating down on them. "The governor?" Zayirk asked quietly. Mara let out a trembling laugh and leaned against him. "I don't even have an uncle," she whispered. Zayirk looked down at her. For the first time, the deep sorrow in his eyes cleared. He shook his head slowly, a gesture of pure disbelief. "You are a terrible liar, Mara Ellison," he said. Then softer, almost in awe. "But you are a magnificent fighter. The moments after danger are strange, too quiet." They walked slowly out of the canyon, leaving the shadows behind. Near a stand of ironwood trees, Zayirk whistled low. From the brush emerged a bay horse, her rented gelding. True to his nature, Zayirk had found the animal a day earlier and tethered it nearby, waiting. He checked the saddle, adjusted the reins, every movement precise, efficient, heartbreaking. He was preparing to say goodbye. He led the horse to her and placed the reins in her hands. "The road is that way," he said, pointing north. 2 miles. Follow the ruts. You'll reach the schoolhouse by sunset." He stepped back. The wall was returning. He was the Indian. She was the lady. The crisis had passed, and the world demanded they return to their assigned places. "You'll be safe there," he added. "And I'll go where the wind goes." Mara wrapped her fingers around the worn leather reins. She looked toward the road, a straight, dusty line leading to town, to schedules, to safety, to a life where she would once again be the grieving woman everyone pitied, a life of empty rooms. Then she looked back at the desert, at the vast, terrifying, beautiful sprawl of stone and sage, and finally, at the man standing before it, the man who greeted the sun each morning, the man who carried her when she was broken, the man who taught her that silence did not have to mean loneliness. She understood then. The map she brought from Boston was useless here. She needed a new one. Mara placed her foot in the stirrup and swung into the saddle, wincing as her ankle protested. She steadied herself, gathered the reins. But she did not turn the horse north. She turned it south, toward the deep mountains, toward the wild. Zayirk frowned. "Mara, the town is the other way." She looked down at him. Sunlight caught the gold in her hair and the dust along her cheek. She did not look hollow anymore. She looked whole. "The school can wait," she said softly. "The children will still be there come autumn." She hesitated. Then a small, almost playful smile touched her lips. The first real smile she had worn since before the war. "I find I'm not ready to leave my guide," Mara Ellison said quietly. "Not yet. I still have much to learn about the desert, and I suspect I'll need someone to show me which plants can heal, and which stories are best told as bluffs." Zayirk stared at her. He glanced toward the road, then back at her again. Something inside him shifted. The hard mask of the silent scout cracked, and then, wonderfully, it broke apart. He smiled. Not a polite smile, not a guarded one, but a smile that reached his eyes, creasing the corners, lighting his face like sunrise spilling across a canyon wall. It was the smile of a man who had known loneliness his entire life, and suddenly did not. "This is hard country, Mara," he said gently. "I know," she answered, "but I'm not afraid of the heat anymore." Zayirk didn't argue. He reached for the bridle, but he didn't lead the horse. Instead, he walked beside her, matching his stride to hers. Together they turned away from the road. They moved into the golden haze of the afternoon, leaving the tracks behind. She had come west, searching for a place to hide from her past. She had come seeking silence deep enough to bury her grief. But instead, she found a man who taught her how to stand in the sun, and the desert, patient and ancient, remembered them both. "Thank you, my friends, for walking this trail with me today. It's a powerful thing, isn't it? To realize that sometimes the wrong road leads us exactly where we were meant to be. I think there's a little bit of Mara Ellison in all of us, searching for the courage to step in front of the gun, or simply the courage to change direction. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this story. Do you think Mara made the right choice when she turned away from the town? And while you're there, tell me where you're listening from, whether you're watching snowfall in Canada, feeling the heat in Florida, or winding down your evening in Australia. I read every single one of your messages. They remind me that this campfire circle stretches all across the world. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like. It helps more travelers find their way here. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a journey into the wild. Until next time, keep your eyes on the horizon and take care of one another. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West. Stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blazed the trail. Subscribe, share, leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you. Aviso legal/disclaimer. These stories are crafted purely for entertainment and may contain imaginative additions or dramatic interpretations inspired by old frontier eras. We use AI-based resources, voice, imagery, and drafting as part of our creative process. But every final detail is carefully reviewed and shaped by human effort to preserve emotional depth and authenticity. We strictly follow YouTube's rules regarding AI-generated content and refrain from deepfakes, altered identities, or misleading representations. All images, sounds, and related materials are lawfully obtained. Please do not reuse, modify, or distribute any portion of this content without written permission. Thank you for valuing creativity, respect, and original work.